Hello, and welcome to Manga Splaining, the show where we recommend great manga to folks who haven't read much manga before. Hosted by Deb Aoki, David Brothers, Christopher Woodrow-Butcher, and Chip Zdarsky. Follow along with our show notes and our reading list at mangasplaining.com. And true to my tradition of messing up the intro, I wasn't supposed to say my name when I did in that one. I should have just said myself, David Brothers. But anyway, this is maybe our 100th episode of Manga Splaining, and in celebration of this monumental achievement, we have kicked Deb and Christopher off the show for the week, and we're talking to Jocelyne Allen and Andrew Woodrow-Butcher, the editor and translator of Okinawa by Susumu Higa, which was published in part by our friends Christopher and Deb. Chip, I'm kind of excited to do like a co-interview with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. Frankly, I'm excited to not have Chris here. just constantly interrupting, and because this is his project, we can just trash it. It's amazing.
And I've got the edit, so he can't do anything really.
Wow,
he could really get us in the show notes, though. That's the troublesome part.
Yeah, his husband is here, so that might be an issue.
Yeah, we'll see. But we are here to talk about Okinawa by Susumu Higa, winner of the Japan Media Arts Award for Manga, nominated for the Fauve d'Or at the Angoulême International Comic Festival. I'm trying my best with the French. And essentially, Okinawa is two parts, kind of two graphic novels in one, that chart the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Okinawa in World War II, then also life on the island, kind of in the aftermath of all of that, stretching decades up through the 2010s. Really fascinating and moving work. I'm stoked, let's say, to have the editor and the translator here to shed a little light on the project, or even just to talk about the project with us. I shouldn't promise, magic tricks and secrets and things like that. Yeah. Just to have a nice conversation. But Andrew, can we start with you?
Sure.
How did you get involved in the project? And also, the first time you read Okinawa, kind of what was your big takeaway? What struck you as being really quality about this book?
How did I get involved? We were talking about pulling this project together before Manga Splaining existed. It was going to be a DIY kind of publishing endeavor. And I really just raised my hand among our little group of, at that time, 3, and said, oh, can I do this part? I was very enthusiastic and pushy. So I think that's how I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be... This is the first book I edited, ever. And I wanted to try my hand at doing that for a while, and this opportunity seemed to be in front of me. So really, I just was like, let me do it. And then they let me do it.
It's amazing how often that works.
Yeah. And I don't remember a first reading, because I sort of read it in weird phases of linguistic access, because I think I was first shown the Japanese editions, which I can't really read. Can't read at all. Mm-hmm. But I could obviously read in the sense that they're visual and flip through and talk about what I thought of the work and that sort of thing. But I didn't have a direct access. And then I'm pretty sure I encountered the French editions, which I could decently read. Yeah, I think that was the order of operations. But, obviously still reading in a second language, mm-hmm. And in a translation. So it was sort of gradually came into focus, because then eventually, of course, I read Jocelyne's translation. And that was the first time I had sort of more direct experience of reading the book. Well, more direct and less direct, as translations are.
So it's interesting that you came to it first through the French version then.
Yeah.
Jocelyne, do you read French?
Yeah, I read French as well.
Wow.
Okay, so when you're translating something that has been adapted into other languages that you also know, do you read those to see what they did with the material?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm assuming you did that with this then.
I don't read them so much as I reference them. I find that, especially with French, and this is not a slam on the French translation market by any means.
Oh, you can slam them. That's fine.
All right, let's get down and dirty. Let's shove some faces against some walls.
Yeah.
But the French translation market is more kind of they're lean more towards adapting a work. So they'll translate it and then they'll kind of rewrite it largely in a way that we don't generally do in English. It's kind of frowned upon to do that in English. So French translations tend to be a little looser from the source text, the Japanese manga. So for my style of translation, it's not very useful to actually read them because I find that interferes with me staying with the Japanese. But it's good for when I'm like, what is he saying here? Like, what does this even
Yeah.
mean? And then I can look at someone else's take on it basically and be like, oh, that's how you interpreted that. Actually, I don't think that's right, but now I understand what it is. Or actually, you're totally on the right track. I'm going to follow your lead. So having those like other translations is a useful reference tool like that, but I don't actually read them through because I find it interferes with my own translation.
Andrew, did that interfere when you read Jocelyne's eventual translation? Like, were there things in Jocelyne's translation where you're just like, oh, that's not how I remember it, or it's coming across differently than what I read in French?
I would say no, it didn't interfere. Part of that is because this was a long project over many years. So it wasn't like I read it on Tuesday and then read the translation from Jocelyne on Friday and was like, wait a minute. I read the French and then a year and a half later I was looking at the translation. And so there wasn't that direct thing. Though I will say for this project and for something else I've worked on since where there's been a French edition, I've had the same experience that Jocelyne is talking about, where it's like, this, I don't quite get this scene or something. What did the French do here? Not that it's going to be, a better rendition from the Japanese or anything, but more like, this is a problem of making the scene work or something, and I just need to know what the options are, what some options might be.
Like a little more context is hugely helpful, I guess.
A different angle.
Yeah,
definitely. So
in the early stages of this, like, what makes you decide on a project, Jocelyne? I know you're friends with Chris and Andrew, and are you interested in kind of more historical material, or do you kind of veer away from that because maybe it's harder?
I would say that I'm pretty interested in everything, which is maybe reflected in like my choices of translation projects. Because if you look at my list of publications, it's like all over the place. I tend to like do more stuff like queer manga and like things of like BL and LGBTQ plus kind of stuff, but I really have done everything. So I've done a lot of historical fantasy, like The Rose of Versailles by Ikeda Ryoko, which came out from Udon. I think you guys read that.
Yeah, we covered it. Yeah. I think we may have shouted you out in it.
Thanks for the shout out. I tend to just go with whatever interests me, and for Okinawa and this project in particular, I've always been really fascinated with the history and culture of Okinawa itself. So even before I got involved with this, before the first time I read this book, I was kind of fascinated with, because it's one of those places, like it was annexed by Japan and it's had this really tumultuous history. It has its own culture and language that's very distinctive and separate from Japanese culture. And as a language nerd, I love Uchinaguchi, the Okinawan native language. It's so cool. I keep trying to study it, but I'm really bad at it. So when this came along, I was like, oh, this is already tailors with what I'm interested in. So now a lot of me choosing projects is like, oh, I can learn more about something by doing this project. So when Okinawa came along, I was like, oh, I can learn more about Okinawa. Great, let's do some translating.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I realized reading this was a couple years before I was born, my grandfather was in the Air Force. They were stationed in Okinawa. So it's always been a place that I've heard a lot about, but had no mental image or even kind of like inkling of what it was like, other than, the place where my mom took a lot of cool pictures in high school, like that kind of thing. So seeing such a personal and intimate look at the people of Okinawa is really, what's the best word for it? Really fascinating. Like I was entertained and then also like educated at the same time, but not in an edutainment kind of way,
I'm glad you were not edutained.
But Chip, how did you feel checking this out? Like, I assume you were pretty into it. It seems like something that would be up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, my only reference point for Okinawa is Karate Kid Part 2. So
yeah, very similarly.
Yeah, I would say that entertained me and this educated me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really didn't know a lot about Okinawa, and I was actually really fascinated. Well, first of all, the fact that the book didn't dwell as much on the idea of the Battle of Okinawa, but the after effects and like the decades after and modern day. I think that's really important because I think the tendency is usually to focus on those like the pivotal moment instead of like the aftermath of those moments. So I appreciated that in this, and also the interview at the end. Manga splaining readers will know and probably agree with me and love the fact that I do not read the essays at the end of any of these manga collections. I just feel that the work should stand on its own. It's not laziness. I want you
I'm
to know
totally
that.
the same, by the way. I don't
So
read.
there
I
you
don't
go.
read. Yeah, I don't like to read the essays.
Yeah. But this one I actually looked forward to reading, just because you could tell like the story was obviously very personal, and I want some more insight. So I found the essay as kind of informative and interesting as the rest of the short stories. One of the things that actually jumped out for me in that essay, and I wonder if it factors in at all to Jocelyne, your choice to do this book, and Andrew, your choice to make this your publishing imprint's first book. The author talks a lot about how he sees the relationship between Japan and Okinawa the same as Russia and Ukraine, which is not something that really kind of crossed my mind, even kind of during the reading of this, even though I knew about like military bases and stuff. Was there any concern from either of you about maybe stepping in it a little bit with mainland Japanese publishers as a result? Like, how is this work viewed in the rest of the manga industry?
Oh, such a big
Hmm.
question.
I used to be a journalist, so.
Oh no, I'm being grilled.
What are your thoughts on the war with Russia and Ukraine? I want your answers now, damn it.
Oh no, I'm just a translator.
Well, I mean, I'll start with Andrew because, like, obviously, this is your choice to publish this as the first of your imprint. Were there any concerns going in, or and also how do you feel this work is viewed amongst Japanese publishers?
I don't think there were any concerns about like this being too political or something.
Yeah.
Certainly with regard to like Tokyo publishing, I don't think that anyone is sitting in an office in Tokyo fretting about the English language editions of these books which came out like 15 years ago
Yeah.
in Japan. I think they're not thinking about it at all.
Yeah.
And even we asked Higa what the reaction was in mainland Japan, and he said something to the effect of like the reaction wasn't very big.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't. It just didn't cause a political sensation, which is the problem. That's the problem
Yeah.
of Okinawa, that people aren't paying attention to these issues.
Mhm.
And so he's doing. This book does what it can. We're doing what we can. Higa's doing what he can to raise these issues, but they're just not having a lot of traction, and there's a lot of. Yeah, so that's the sort of problem. I don't think we were worried about it being overly political. We did have a conversation for sure about like how will an American readership or an Anglophone readership react to this, because it's also about American imperialism and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But again, I
Yeah.
think the answer is, well, it's important that a reaction. It would be great if there was a reaction, if people started thinking about this more. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was fascinated reading it. That not that it's got like a both sides feel to it, but like especially in the scenes during the war and just after, like the American soldiers are portrayed kindly for the most part.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting. Like the stress throughout the book kind of lies in they're not leaving, and then it's just the fact of their presence, and they're not necessarily, the individuals aren't necessarily the bad people, but the complex that has like dug into Okinawa is the problem. Yeah, I can see how it wouldn't hit as being like people need to pay attention to this problem, as more like this is just how life is right now, and it's not the best situation,
Yeah.
but it's complicated.
There's an
Yeah.
amazing amount of empathy in his
Yeah.
view, right? Even when he's outlining big issues that are real problems, he still has a lot of
Yeah.
empathy for the individuals.
Mhm.
But he's totally pointing at the bigger systemic issues, right? Like it's not just, and the thing is, the reason there wasn't such a big political controversy about the book when it was published in Japan is because this has been the state of affairs for like 70 years, like no one cares. No one in mainland Japan thinks about Okinawa except as a place to go on holiday, which is the issue. But you publish stuff about like, and you publish a book like this trying to raise awareness of like what it's like to be living in these situations, but it doesn't cause really any stir because it's just part of the air you breathe in Japan. Like on the news, they'll be like, oh, the governor of Okinawa is mad at America again. Next up, the weather. Like it's constantly there. So it's really hard to make people, I think, in mainland Japan really notice that this is like a real issue. Like this isn't just like, oh, it's fine, the Americans are there, we can go to America Town when we go to Naha. Like, there's no impetus to change because the Japanese government likes the status quo. They like having the Americans there. There's a financial incentive. There's lots of quid pro quo kind of things going on. And Okinawa's the poorest prefecture in the country. They don't have any political, financial heft with the mainland government. So things continue as they are.
The bit where the guy mentions that the base stores a lot of stuff, but it doesn't make or produce anything that actually benefits the island was really moving, I think. And I think from a North American perspective, my first thought went to Native Americans, but also Hawaii, and the way that the U.S. has kind of controlled that for a long time. In a way that we don't really think about very often, to our discredit.
There's definitely parallels between Okinawa and Japan and Hawaii and America for sure.
Yeah. I love the chapter where a bunch of people on the island were also protesting against it who worked on the base. And everyone's like, how do you work on the base and then also protest? Well, they're like, the money's good and we still have to support our family. But like, we got to think about the future as well and kind of what all this means for us coming down the line.
Yeah.
Higa provides so many different perspectives, I think, in the book.
Yeah.
And he's like, everyone's been saying, like, so empathetic to every individual. Like, he's not painting anyone as a villain, any individual as a villain. He's just trying to show, like, this is what is happening in Okinawa from all these different perspectives, which is why I think the work is so effective, because he doesn't just limit himself to, like, here's my story. Like, he's just showing, like, this is what's going on. And so you can see it from all of these different angles and really understand in a deeper way, I think. Even though they're short stories, there's a real depth to the entire collection that I think is really fascinating. And I hope that readers will come away with a lot of the empathy that Higa has for the situation.
I think it fits together phenomenally well for like comics that were drawn 15 years apart, I think.
Yeah.
95
and there's a big gap between the two of them.
Yeah.
Do you find, Jocelyne, with a book like this that's kind of nonfiction set in Japan, do you have to kind of rein in, I guess, kind of more casual inflection in something like this? Like, does it, like reading this, it feels a bit more kind of like, maybe it's just because other manga I've read usually deal with like teens and things like that, so you're having to come up with like a lot of kind of modern kind of language, and here it seems very kind of straightforward and maybe a bit more subtle. Is that a reflection of the text, or is that a reflection of you knowing it's nonfiction?
It's definitely a reflection of the text. Obviously, I'm translating knowing that there's the nonfiction element to it, but the stories are themselves fiction, right? They're just based on actual experiences. I think the closest actual nonfiction in the book is, I think it's called My Mother, the story about his mother. That's actually based on like a true story and like basically 100% true. Well, maybe 95. I don't want to ascribe to how much truth. Like it's not me to say, but Higa's style of writing is like that though. It's very straightforward. It's very like, I mean, it's naturalistic. Like I think the characters speak in a way that's very natural to their positions and the lives they're living. But he's not going for slang or weird, special kind of jargon, or he doesn't do a lot of the manga tropes of like having every character have a certain different ending to the way they speak. In a lot of manga, they'll be like, one person always says ne at the end of their words, and one person always says nda at the end of their sentences. And he doesn't do any of those kinds of tricks. So I think that helps to provide that more straightforward, kind of naturalistic feel to the dialogue and the text.
Yeah.
He's a good writer, and I'm just following his lead basically.
Because he's, not only, he's an alive author, but he's also been interviewed for this publication. Do you ever have contact with him for clarification of anything because it deals with history and nonfiction wrapped in fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't reached out to him for like clarification on things because I think, like I said, I feel his work is straightforward in that way. Like it's not complicated for me as a translator, except for conveying it accurately.
You did get a walking tour of Naha from him before you started.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was going to say that. So it helps to have that contact with him because actually before, when we were trying to publish this as an independent project, Chris and I went to, Andrew, you came with us, didn't you?
I didn't visit him that trip, though. So I wasn't there.
No, but you came on the trip.
I was on the island at the same time, yes. I went to the museum.
Oh, right. Chris and I went to meet with Higa to sign papers and talk contract stuff. And he's an extremely generous person with his time and his home and his heart. He's just like such a great guy. And he was like, let me give you this walking tour of Naha. And so he took us around to all these different places in Naha, like the market, and we bought some of those delicious deep fried donut things. What are those? Sata andaji, I think. Andago? Anyway, I can't remember the exact name of them, but they're really good. If you ever go to Okinawa, get them.
All right.
And he just kind of gave us like the history, like this has been here for this long. And he took us to like some burial sites where like they're just integrated into the city. So it's just like you're walking along, there's a mound, and it's like, that's a burial site. And he told us like all of this history about, those kinds of sites and the city in general. And then certain islands where he set some of the stories, like, there's stories on like those remote islands off of the main Okinawan island. So he told us a lot of stories about those places and the history and culture there and about the spirituality, native religion. I use religion in quotes because it's more of a spirituality than a religion. He told us a lot about like those places of worship that you see in the Mabui section of Okinawa. So getting all of that kind of like just kind of bathing in the context of the story and his interpretations of that history was really, really helpful and informative when I was actually doing the translation. So I think that's part of the reason why I didn't really need to be like, hey, can you confirm this for me? Because he already kind of had.
Yeah. He seemed very personable in the interview, especially by the end, where his last answer is, great, let's drink.
He fed us. He's so nice because Andrew and I are both vegetarians. And he remembered that as a vegetarian from the last time that we saw him, which was like 5 years earlier.
Wow.
Was like so thoughtful. And so he had prepared this little feast for us with like
Not little feast,
plenty of vegetarian food. Yeah, big feast. It was a lot of food.
It was a mountain. It was a mountain of food.
Yeah, and he had so much vegetarian food there too for me because he's like, I know you can't eat meat, and so he's like, is this good? And I was like, this is way too much, sir.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I was glad to have Andrew with me. Like, please, Andrew, eat more vegetarian
Share
food.
the wealth. Yeah. Could you all talk about the interview, kind of the process of getting that done a little bit? Because I've never got to interview a mangaka before. I talk to like a comics guy at least once a week. It's super old news to me now. But like manga creators, what is that like? Like, did you go to his house for this interview or like meet at a coffee shop?
We did. We were sat in his garden and he had prepared mochi and tea. And we just sat outside. And I think the fact that this is a manga about politics and history made the interviewing juicy and kind of easy, in the sense that there is a lot to talk about. Like, this is a book about real stuff around us in the world.
Yeah.
But he's very forthcoming, very, very forthcoming. He was not a hard interview subject at all. Just sort of like, hey, what about this? And then there he goes. And that interview, I don't remember how many pages it turned out as, but it was a long sit down. It was like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, it was like 3 hours. As the
Yeah.
interpreter, I remember.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How does that work then? Like Jocelyn, do you interpret and then translate all of it, and then Andrew, you edit it down?
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot of
That's what
work.
happened. So during the interview, he's like Andrew said, he's so forthcoming and so like willing to talk about this stuff that like half the time he wouldn't even let me translate the questions for him. Like he's like, yeah, I got it, and you just like start talking. Like he understands
it.
enough English to be like, yeah, no, I get the gist of this. Let me go off. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and then speaking about the translating and interpreting, after we did the interview, Chris sort of like transcribed everything, and then I went over it with the tape to make sure that everything was accurate and kind of redid some stuff. So you're getting the nice version of it, the like cleaned up, accurate, everything's good version in the book.
Yeah. There was one point, the interview is 17 pages, by the way.
Oh,
Very good. And on page 10 is one of my favorite moments in the actual book. I've got several favorites, but this is the last one I spotted. When he asks if any of you are religious, and the manga explaining extra crew says it's difficult to say. I thought that was like so on point for the kind of book this is, and almost could have been a conversation from a short story in the book. The way it kind of speaks to how complex life can be.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of characters who say, well, I don't really believe in spirits and stuff, but like maybe I should go pray for a little while or something. You know?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how many stories kind of follow that path.
Yeah.
Where at some point it's like, all right, we got to call in this person to take care of this with a prayer or ceremony. It's like I started to get used to the rhythm of it. I'm like, oh, I bet when I turn the page, someone's gonna call for this person again.
Dun 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 dun, the Utah
Dun, 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 dun.
appears.
Right?
Yeah.
Super good. But
Yeah.
it speaks to kind of also the vibe I got from the stories of how, like the fact that there's a graveyard for everyone who died at the Battle of Okinawa felt really significant. And
Yeah.
the baseball player remarks on that, inside the story, how he's like, wow, we have one of our own, but it's only for our dead.
Yeah.
Like it just feels really moving and kind of like maybe something we should aspire to.
Yeah.
And the religion question reminded me of that because there's a lot in religion that's good. There's a lot in religion that's bad. And it's kind of like, how do you find your way between them? And the answer is nobody really knows, as near as I can tell. So it's weirdly comforting to read a graphic novel with similar ideas.
Yeah.
I think that it's important because we did ask him about, if he was religious and or sort of why this presence was there. And I think that this sort of shows why the word religion isn't exactly right, because this is sort of standing in for not that these practices aren't religious, if perhaps, but they're standing in for sort of a attachment to culture and history, a community history, cultural history, and that it's sort of like let's fix everything, let's fix this stuff in this chapter with a prayer, but it's not it. It is the prayer, but it's also the coming together and the just like this is a way to show that this community, still has its roots and still exists and has its practices. I think it's really I think that's really rich. I think there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. Nothing is ever solved by any one single effort. There's always like a group of people in that moment who all kind of contribute in some way.
Yeah.
Chip, did you have a favorite short story in here? One where you were like, that's the one?
I don't know if there's like one that's like the standout for me, but it's funny when you mentioned that moment in the baseball player one. Like I think that was the moment in it that hit me the most. The recognition of the fact that they recognize everyone who died, no matter the side. Like that hit me really hard. I was just like, oh wow, that's like I actually considered it because I've been to the memorial in Washington for Vietnam, and it's like, oh, that's really a powerful thing, but like. I'm like, how much more powerful would it be if it had all the Vietnamese, everyone who died? Because like that's what they should be memorializing: the fact that all these people died in this war. Yeah, that one hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, I think for me it was the one about the military workers, the people who worked on base, because it was the closest to my real life experience.
Yeah,
like working at a Burger King on a military base. Which counted as a government job, so I got 2 raises a year. It was actually kind of amazing. But also like sort of strange the older I get. It's like, oh, that really is kind of permeated into our culture in a way that like we can never be rid of military bases again. And that's
Yeah.
something that comes up in Okinawa over and over. From I want to say the first story has a line where they say like, "Oh, if you build a base here, war's going to come here. Like that's how it happens. That's how it always
Yeah.
happens."
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it always feels a bit like I didn't actually do the homework, but the first story is probably the best.
Yeah,
Like it really kind of sums up the feeling of like war encroaching upon
Mhm.
a community and just how out of their control it all is.
hmm
I quite like that one. How about
and yeah,
Jocelyne and Andrew? What are your favorites?
Oh, dang. I know, Andrew, do you have a favorite?
or even just ones that stand
Uh,
out in your head.
Yeah, the ones that stand out.
The one that I think of when people ask me this question is the one with the documents found in the caverns under Shuri Castle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so the war is coming. It's clearly coming. They're trying to sort of evacuate the national treasures in this palace, basically, and they discover a cavern full of documents that will disintegrate if exposed to air, like contemporary air or something different air than the air they've been stored in. And so there's this rush to translate everything and get it down before everything is destroyed. But I think that's like I think this book is about not just about the destruction of stuff, but obviously culture, and these documents are culture. And I think that works really well. But I love how he also weaves one of these ancient texts, or not ancient, but hundreds of years old texts about a political situation in Okinawa, 400 years ago or something, into the contemporary story, and shows sort of like how this stuff is cyclical, and Okinawa has been caught between other powers many times in its history.
Yeah.
I took a screenshot of that page where the teacher and the students are the people in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first I was reading very late. I was like, oh, wait, did I miss something? But then I flipped back real fast. I was like, no, this is exactly what I thought. And it's so good. Like it's such a good approach to that story to make it very modern and personal.
Yeah, that's a great one. I just love the fact that no one else gives a shit because there's no gold or jewels that were found. Like, oh, whatever, all right.
That was really poignant.
Just a bunch of papers.
Yeah. Jocelyne, how about you? What do you think of?
I really like that story as well. Obviously, I totally agree with Andrew on the cultural elements that it brings into play that I think are really important for this book.
Mm-hmm.
The military employees story really resonates with me as well because I'm a base brat. So I grew up in this kind of environment. So I totally, I really related to what you were saying there, David, because it's like, I grew up in this world where like, everyone wears uniforms and they're getting ready to go to war. Like that's their job. And I'm surrounded by that. Like we didn't go to the convenience store. We went to the Canex because that's the military store.
DX,
And so like when we first lived on a non-base environment, it was such a weird experience for me. I was like 13 years old, I think. And I'd never lived anywhere where people weren't at war, technically.
Yeah.
And we went to stores that didn't have military goods. Like it's just really weird. So reading the military employee and that aspect of Okinawan life, I really felt that in my bones. I was like, oh yeah, I know this culture. Like, and seeing it as an adult and seeing it in a different country like that was just like this whole new perspective. And it gave me that thought, like, this is really weird that we do this. And like the story says, like build a base and you ask for war. Like these people, that's their job, is technically to be ready to go kill people. So that really resonated with me, like in a personal way, but also in a way like as a grown up living in this world and as a person who spent her adult life in Japan and like all of these complex factors tied into it for me. So I think that was maybe my favorite story, but it's hard to pick one of all your precious children. So
Of course. I had a question about the sound effects.
Oh yeah.
What goes into the decision to not incorporate the sound effects into the art and just have them translated subtly underneath? Like, at what point do you kind of make that decision? What goes into that decision?
We decided that pretty early, and I think part of it was a lot of these, like his backgrounds are very detailed. There's I think it was like just the sheer scale of trying to get them into the panels was a very big project, and also the register of the book and the readership of the book and what that readership needed, we thought was different than sort of than lighter fare,
Yeah.
That people could deal a bit with the sound effects being glossed rather than being integrated.
And so Jocelyne, do you feel ripped off by that process? Because I feel like one of the cool things about being a translator is like you come up with a sound effect and then you see it like all written out big and cool. But I'm looking at a page here with a helicopter, and there's just like tiny text at the bottom that just says wood.
Yeah, I feel really, really ripped off. I feel like I didn't get my due here.
Yeah.
I actually prefer, especially like Andrew was saying, with a book like this, which is geared towards a definite adult audience and people who are more. It's not like airplane reading kind of situation. Like, and I'm again not denigrating airplane reading. I love it, but like this is people who are really going to engage with the text and like read it. And I think in that case, having the subtitles for the sound effects is more effective as the work.
Yeah.
Like it feels more like you get more of the power of the original art and the original work. Yeah, I'm okay with people doing whatever with the sound effects. Once I send my script in, it's like, well, you do you. I don't generally have any say over how things go after that. So I've made my peace with that a long time ago.
Do you? I mean, I have feelings about this part, but do you, when the book is in print and you get a copy of the book, do you crack it open, or do you just like put it on the shelf?
I open it and go, oh, look, a book. And I open the back and go, there's my name. And then I close it and put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
I never read it.
How long into your career before you started to actively do it that way? Like, was there a point where you just like, your first one, obviously you're flipping through it and you're seeing the words and it's like, it's cool as hell, I'm assuming.
I mean, kind of no. I mean, it sounds awful, but like translating a book means that I'm reading it so many times. And like I'm going over it, like I read it, I'm reading the Japanese, I'm looking at that, I'm writing the English, I'm going over it again, I'm checking against the original Japanese, rewriting, tweaking. I have looked at that book so many times by the time I send in my script that when the book comes, I'm like, oh yeah, you. Like I don't want to look at you anymore.
Yeah.
There's probably like 6 months between sending the script and actually getting the book as well.
At least, yeah.
Sometimes years.
Yeah. Sometimes years. I think I sent the script for this. I finished in like 2019.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. Nice. It was before the pandemic, so please don't ask me about specific translation choices because I can no longer remember them.
It's funny because I did actually have one.
Oh no.
Yeah. No, it's more a joke. I'm sure it's not actually an Ultraman bit, but there's a moment when a mother jumps into the grave where they're hiding out and she goes Shiwachi, and it's the same sound Ultraman makes when he like warps in from outer space.
Oh no, really?
Yeah.
Classic nerd Jocelyne.
Oh, you found me out.
But I'm sure it's just like a hooah type of sound or something,
It might be a reference. Like if it was exactly the same, I would have used, because I would have looked it up, and if it was the same sound,
it's like
a
little bit different.
Sound.
Oh. You know what, Jocelyne? This is a serious book, and frankly, I'm upset that you snuck in an Ultraman reference.
Look, we have to get our fun where we can. All right.
All right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Andrew, you've got a couple of credited letterers on this one. Patrick Crotty of Piao Studios, big fan of that guy, and Kayla E. Can you tell us a little bit about what they brought to the series for you? Was it just sort of like, here's the script, go at it, or?
Because Kayla did the design as well, right?
Yeah. So Kayla was working through Fantagraphics with us to put the print edition together. So Patrick, I think I wasn't completely involved in this, but I think that we put out a call because we were doing this as sort of an independent project. Who would like to letter a book with us? And he raised his hand, and so he and I worked together well, he did the work, obviously, but worked on that, which was great. Kayla got involved when we were designing the print edition. It ended up having a very different look than we'd imagined, which is great. It's beautiful, I think. It turned out well.
Mm-hmm.
We just did some tweaks to make it fit with the style of the print edition. So I would say
Cool.
it's still like 90%, 80%, 90% Patrick's lettering that you're seeing there.
Yeah, it was very clean. Word balloon size is always an issue in localization just because of all of the differences between English and Japanese. But something that was really nice about this book was actually the white space in the balloons when the characters were speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It kept it from feeling very cramped, I guess, is the best way to put it. It feels very natural, I suppose.
That's good to hear. It felt sometimes it was a challenge to get any white space into those balloons. It's not a wordy book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's great. I'm glad it works.
I was also going to ask about the actual process between the two of you, because editing a book that's already in existence feels like a very different thing. Do you just have like a very light hand on the edit of what Jocelyne sends in, or are there any points of disagreement between the two of you? I want to find out about beefs, basically.
Right. So much beef.
Oh, we're beefing. I still remember Andrew.
Yeah.
It's 2019.
Yeah. Started a whole pandemic.
It's been really hard to remain friends, is what I'm saying.
Basically, Jocelyne would send me the script and I would read it alongside the images and I would be like, can you clarify this? I don't understand it. Or that was really it. Just like, I have just a couple of questions for this chapter. Can you let me know, does this mean this in this sense or this in this sense? And then sometimes the editing would be like massaging things so they'd fit in the word balloon. We need to cut 4 words out of this or it's not getting in there. So let's rearrange this.
Okay. Yeah.
This has a bunch of editorial choices to be made around like how we are going to represent the layers of different languages. Because this book on the page has Japanese, it has Okinawan dialect Japanese and Okinawan language and English in it. And so we had to make decisions around like, what are we italicizing? What goes between quotation marks? What are we glossing at the end of the book? There was a bunch of editorial choices to be made there, which, I didn't make in a vacuum. I also would be like, Jocelyne, what do you think of this? Does this make sense? Or sometimes I would have to say, is this like a random exclamation or is this like a word in a dialect or, so that I know how to treat it.
Mm.
But yeah, it's not like I was like, okay, well, let's get rid of this scene. Let's.
Yeah.
The manga splaining cut. Yeah.
I think Andrew had a really light editorial touch compared to like a lot of editors I've worked with. I think you really were just like wanted to maintain the structure that was already there and just make it as good as it can be, which was really a gratifying experience for me. I was like, oh, great, we're getting this done. It felt like a really natural, good edit. And I think it came through in the book, I hope.
Yeah.
I think so.
You mentioned cutting text to fit the balloon. Do you ever go the opposite route and increase the size of the balloon? Like go into the art and actually like give yourself more space?
In this case, that did not happen.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
You're lazy.
Yeah. So lazy.
Right.
Well, Patrick was lazy. Because I wouldn't have been the person to do that. No, we didn't do that. There were only a couple instances where we did anything, dabbled in the art at all. There are maybe 2 or 3 moments where the sound effect has to be in the balloon, or where there needed to be like drawn text. Aside from that, it's just we emptied the balloons of the Japanese, we filled them up with English.
This is maybe a bit too nerdy, but you're talking about representing the different languages. So when the Americans are speaking, you do the pointy brackets.
Yeah.
Which I find to be a very North American thing. Is that a conscious choice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think I had that in my original script as a suggestion. I can't remember, but I felt like using a North American convention would make it easier for readers to follow along. Like if you're a comics reader, you're already used to seeing other languages done with those kinds of like angle brackets or something like that. So for me, that was definitely, I know I put that choice on the table, but I can't remember how the final decision was made. Andrew, do you?
I think you're right that they were in your script already. And I was like, yeah, this totally is readable and makes sense to me. Let's keep on doing that.
It's funny because having done 100 episodes of this, and obviously my journey through reading all this manga, I've been broken of that. Like I look at those, I'm like, oh no, I don't like that. I like how it's been done in all the other different types of manga, and like even in my own book, a little plug for Image Comics, public domain that I write and draw, and I color and I letter it. I
Did
design
you
it
win
as
an
well.
award for that one?
I won the Eisner this year for Best New Series, but I don't really want to get into that. This isn't about my project; it's about your project. But I picked up a manga thing for representing other languages, which was the double line word balloon. And I think maybe it was Ping Pong that was the first one to kind of.
Oh yeah,
I noticed that. Yeah, I quite liked that. It felt very natural and didn't interfere with the text. But seeing it here, I'm just like, oh, I think they were thinking of like the North American audience, and looks like I'm correct once again.
There's also a thing there that we can't touch the art as much as like we want to not touch the art as much as possible. So doing that like double line balloon would mean we would have to go in and redraw something.
Yeah.
So that's sort of we want to work with the conventions of the text alone if possible, because it's sort of like a taboo to redraw the art.
And I feel like also there are some word balloons that mix languages, but have to be a half double outline balloon.
I would love to see the math on figuring that out.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
Do you recall how they were rendered in Japanese, the English speakers?
I think, if I'm recalling correctly, they were rendered horizontally. So usually Japanese text is
interesting.
Vertical, or I don't have the manga here with me, so I can't double check. But I know usually there's that convention in manga, like if you're doing the text vertically, then if the Japanese is vertical, then you do the English. If it's supposed to be another language, you do it horizontally to make it clear.
Oh, that's cool.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's the usual convention. So
I'm still learning about manga.
After 100 episodes, you still have something to learn.
Yeah. We can get Chris to put the original Japanese in the show notes, get a little more education for our friends and family who are listening. No, that's really cool. Thanks for... Yeah. I never thought about that aspect of lettering manga, like in Japanese.
Yeah.
I mean, manga lettering in Japanese is really different because they don't letter it. Like, the artist does all of the art stuff and they send it to the printer, and the printer just basically puts the text into where it's supposed to go on the page. Yeah. So like, there's not like font choice or like, it's all the same font. It all looks the same, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, there's like no John Workman of manga lettering.
No.
As near as I can
Really?
tell. Yeah.
It's nothing like that. So when you're trying to distinguish languages like that, you need an actual like physical way of distinguishing them so that doesn't rely on font, because the printer is not going to do any special fonts for you. They're just not.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Why is there a reason for that? Like, is it just no one's ever attempted?
Production.
Yeah.
I think it's a history of manga thing, like because manga comes from like starts in the magazines, and so magazines have like their own way of doing things. And early manga magazines used to do a mix of like text and manga, so it'd be like short stories, and then they'd also have manga. So when you're doing the printing, especially back then, everything's typeset, right? Like you have to actually move physical little, type.
Yeah.
Which is like wild to think about. So it's a lot easier to do everything in the same type than to replace or so I think it comes from that history of like how manga came up in Japan as like originally a magazine, and then rather than as a separate art form. Like I don't know the history of North American comics, so I could be totally way off, but yeah, I think it's a printer vestige and it's just a holdover now, and that's how we do things. So
I think that makes a lot of sense, because like weekly North American comics tend to be pretty rare. So you have time to have someone go in and do everything by hand. But usually the sound effects in manga, I think, are where the artist kind of gets to shine in terms of is typography the right word for that? We'll go with typography.
Sure.
Sure, I think it works. I mean, indie artists will do their own lettering and stuff. Like Kondo Akino, whose work was featured recently in Manga Splaining, she does all of her lettering by hand. Like, it's all her.
Okay.
Cool.
But she also could never work for a weekly magazine because that schedule is impossible when you're lettering everything on your own.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I love how no matter where you make comics, like practical considerations like that have such a huge effect on the art. Like it sounds like art school 101, like, the stuff you have defines what you get to do, but it can result in such fascinating differences, I guess, between the different markets.
Yeah, it's two totally different industries. It's kind of amazing. Yeah.
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 Chip, I've got a question for you about Okinawa, believe it or not. Do you
All right.
think that this would appeal to fans of Garth Ennis? He has like The Boys, but then he has like sensitive war stories as well. And I kind of thought of him a little bit while reading this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not entirely sure. I think there's elements of it, but his stuff's also just so I don't want to say gross. Not gross, but it's there's an elevated baseness, if that makes sense. Like he's really good at writing kind of base feeling stories, and I don't think there's a baseness here, even in the war parts.
That's true.
A bit more high-minded, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a specific type of Garth Ennis reader, like you or myself.
Oh, the best of the best.
The best of the best. The best of the best would appreciate it. Yeah. I'm really interested to see how this hits in North America, because I think it's a fantastic work, and it's a great kind of first choice for you guys as a publisher. But it is funny, like we talked about earlier in the interview. The author says, like, yeah, it hits a Japanese market, but not like it's obviously not Chainsaw Man or Naruto or anything like that. But I think there's a certain segment of the North American kind of comics market that would really, really dig this. I think Fantagraphics is a great choice too, to kind of co-publish.
Yeah.
I don't want to blow so much smoke up your ass, but good job, everyone.
Yeah.
Team MSX.
Yeah.
For the win.
Oh, I don't know if I said at the top of the podcast. I probably should have, but this was serialized on mangasplainingextra.com first. So from Japanese manga to digital comic, I guess is a better term than webcomic here, to print US edition again. Did you take a second pass of the copy editing after the web edition? Or was it basically done when it was up on Mangasplaining Extra?
There was another round of copy edits to bring it to print. And like I said, there was a little bit of, some lettering tweaks for the print edition. And then, we were putting together a book. So we had to do things like design the map that he was included in the original editions and a whole bunch of stuff just to make this giant 554-page brick. But yeah, so it was an opportunity to go through and we had another set of eyes. We handed it in, and Fantagraphics loved the book, but they were like, this one thing here. There was a lot of adding and or removing commas. That's actually the biggest.
That's the biggest fight I find between editors in English-speaking works. It was the commas.
Years long at Viz to get the Oxford comma. No joke.
Yeah. Jocelyne, how do you feel about the Oxford comma? I saw a face.
I am pro Oxford comma, and I have editors who take it out, and I get mad, which is why I was like, "Don't say anything about the Oxford comma."
I get mad as well. I'm with you.
It should be there.
Yes.
I think the book. I think it was great when we serialized it, but I think who has the luxury of going back and after you've already put the book in the world and being like, wait, I could fix these 17 commas. That's luxury, but it also like editorial luxury, whatever that is. But it also just makes the book better.
Yeah. It's funny because on my side of things in North American comics, with like the DC Marvel Image system, the floppies are the first draft. And then when we do the collections, which will, ostensibly last longer, that's when we go through like, oh, that needed the comma or that taken out or like a few things were spelled wrong here or there. So yeah, I appreciate that second pass.
Same. Like, good can always be better, which sounds like a short route to perfectionism, but in like a loose idea of good can always be better.
Yeah. I like, that you have a deadline, but good can always be better until the deadline.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite things about working in publishing, and this has been for years now, is whenever you get a book back from the printer and you open it in the first page, you find a typo. And like consistently, It is maddening, but it's also like kind of humbling at the same time. Like you're never going to catch everything. So it's good to have that Fantagraphics pass as well.
Yeah, for sure.
We should probably talk a little bit about what Christopher and Deb brought to the project.
Did they bring anything?
Yeah, anything?
Well, you know, Chris, I mean.
Yeah.
He's why it's 600 pages.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. He's why the interview was 3 hours long. Like,
It's
it's
so funny when I crack this open because, like, consistently on Manga Splaining, he'll assign a thing and be like, "Oh, it's just one volume," and then I'll get it and I'll realize it's like 2 books in one. I'm like, "Oh, Chris!" And then as I was going through this, I'm like, "Wait a second." He did it to me again with his own goddamn book.
He did it to the world this time.
He did it to the world. I love it.
The world is being manga-splained by Chris.
Yeah.
It's so good.
They did the moving and the shaking that made it happen. A lot of it.
Yeah.
Not that, we weren't sitting around doing nothing, but they did a lot of that. Chris in particular was doing a lot of when the book was being designed or when it was being prepared for even serialization online. He was the one who was like cleaning up files and that sort of thing. But also just like making this come together and as a project. Yeah. And also like they are collaborators in the sense of like neither of them went through the entire script to do copy edits or anything, but they were still the team. So, having good collaborators to be like, what do you think about this particular choice is always good. Yeah.
And Chris was the one who instigated the whole project, I think, in the beginning. He was the one who approached me, like, because I read the book in like, I'm gonna say like 2009, 2010, something like that. And I was like, oh, it's good. And, I kind of had some conversations with a couple publishers, but it just sort of went nowhere because everyone's like, no one wants to publish that. Like, because it's a very particular book, right? It has its own unique worldview. And especially in 2009, 2010, that was not what was coming out in terms of manga. So it was kind of a hard sell. And then Chris came to me like a couple years after that and was like, hey, what about that Okinawa book you were reading? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, do you think we could publish it? And I'm like, maybe. You mean just us? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And so I sent him some synopses of the books so he could get like actually see the story and not just like look at the pretty pictures. And then I sample translated a couple of the stories for him. So he was trying to shop it around and see what he could do with his connections. And that also sort of fizzled out. And so then there was another kind of couple years of fallow where we were both like, this is a great book, but where is it supposed to go? What home does it have? And then like Andrew was saying before, we kind of came together a couple years after that and we're like, hey, why don't we do it? Like, why don't we just publish books? Like, we all have very specific tastes in manga that we really want to see in this world, but no one's publishing them and it's getting really frustrating. So that's when we really took it on in earnest and we were like, okay, let's try and see if we can do this. And so we talked to Higa and we're like, hey, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, that would be great.
Not even, like, through an agent or an editor, just straight to him? We
talked to an agent that he's worked with to put us in touch with him, but we went and spoke directly with him. So we went to Okinawa because he's really old school. So he was communicating with Higa is a bit of a trial at times because he doesn't have a computer, he doesn't have a cell phone, he does not use the internet at all.
The full Alan Moore.
He does use fax machines.
He has a fax machine.
Classic.
I had to get a fax number so that I could talk to him and send him stuff.
Yeah.
So we went directly to Okinawa to talk to him and say, like, this is what we can do. This is what we can offer. Are you into it? And he's like, yeah, I'm 100% on board. Like, he was immediately from the get-go. He saw that we were really like serious about the book, that we really cared about it, that we were really, really going to do the best we possibly could with it. And it took 5-6 years, but we did that. Yeah. And he's really happy with the result. And yeah, all of the effort was totally worth it. All of the faxes. Plus, he sent me a box of oranges from Okinawa one time. That was really nice.
And he stuck with us, too, which is amazing because we did take a long time to pull this together. And he did not at any point say, you guys are not doing, like, he stuck with us.
He never came at us and was like, "Where's the project at? What's going on? Why aren't you working harder?" He was always really like, "I trust you. I know that you're doing right by my work and right by me." So that's also a lot of the reason why I didn't feel the need to like consult him too much on translation, was just because we already had that really strong relationship. And he was like, "I trust your translation. I trust your abilities. You do what you have to do with the book." And so he was just such a kind and generous person to wait, and it all came together finally, and he's super happy with the results. So that's really gratifying to be able to present the author with a book. Like, I never get to do that. Like, here, what do you think? And they're like, wow. So that was a really great moment.
That's awesome. Do you also, I'm assuming you kept all the faxes and put them into a special book?
Well, because I didn't get an actual fax. I just you can get a fax number online where they send it to you as an email. So I have PDFs of all the faxes.
Not the same.
They'll be in the.
But he also sent me letters. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll include all of our photos and faxes in the anniversary edition.
I once had to make a comic with the Canadian cartoonist Seth via fax. I was interviewing him at the newspaper I worked at, and I would draw a panel, and he only worked by fax, so I had to draw a panel and then fax him that panel, and then he would fax me his panel. We just went back and forth through the fax machine. It was a lot of fun. Very satisfying.
I mean, getting that paper scrolling out, like,
and seeing Seth cartoon show up. Yeah, it was fun.
Amazing. Yeah. So we covered about an hour of Okinawa. Does anyone have any closing thoughts? I don't think we need to do like final thoughts because it's not really a review episode. But anything you want to share with our audience before we get out of here? Rather, before we do an ad break and then get out of here.
Ad breaks are important. Read the book, read Okinawa, please and thank you.
It's really good.
Yeah,
Andrew,
good.
counterpoint.
Don't read this book. No, please definitely read the book. Oh, and on Manga-splaining Extra, I think we're going to run an additional comic by Higa, The Body Tree.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
So look for that, either if you have read Okinawa and loved it, or if you want a taste of his cartooning.
Yeah, that sounds great.
My final thought is I really love this book. It's amazing. It's an amazing accomplishment. And I'm so proud and happy for you guys for pulling it off. And also just the fact that like the manga-splaining has even the smallest part to do with this brings me such joy, even though I'm not seeing a dime from this.
Buy you a drink later?
Love it.
Yeah, that'll make up for it.
I'm in.
Yeah. I am really proud of you two, but I'm really proud of Christopher and Deb as well, because it's kind of cool to turn... I know the idea existed before manga-splaining. We joke so much about publishing manga as manga-splaining, and then they went and did it. And that's, I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, probably very difficult, judging from talking to them, but, worth it.
Also, can I say this is probably the smoothest episode of Manga-splaining without Chris and Deb here? I don't know what that says about them.
Welcome to the podcast, you two. You were officially drafted.
Yeah, you're in. I love it.
I'm Jocelyne Allen with Manga-splaining.
See? Already on board.
Perfect.
I'm perfect.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Yeah. It's my time to shine.
Yes.
Nice. We're going to take a short break. We're going to run an ad, and then we're going to come back and do some shout-outs, and then let you get on with the rest of your day.
Oh, wow.
See you soon.
With everything you have on your plate, earning your degree online seems impossible. But at Grand Canyon University, we specialize in helping you fit a master's degree in business into your busy day. Your graduation team, led by your own GCU counselor, provides you with the personal support you need to succeed. Achieve your goals with a plan and team behind you. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Visit gcu.edu.
All right, we are back. We just had a nice, long conversation about Susumu Higa's Okinawa, a great graphic novel from Manga-splaining Extra and Fantagraphics. Pick it up now. And we're also going to shout out some stuff that we've liked and enjoyed or maybe completely hated over the last while. Jocelyne, you're the most energetic right now, so we're going to lead with you.
It's morning for me, so I still have my energy. I'm going to say one book that's sort of related to Okinawa, which is Kyo Machiko's Cocoon. They just announced, maybe last month, they announced that it's getting an anime adaptation, so I really hope that will lead to an English translation, because it's a really amazing book, similarly about the Okinawan War and what it did to the people of Okinawa, but from the perspective of a troop of schoolgirls who were conscripted to be nurses for the soldiers. And they worked in the caves, all of the caves that you see in Okinawa. You see some of the caves in there in the book. In Cocoon, these girls, like high school girls, junior high school girls, worked in these caves as nurses, taking care of like severely wounded soldiers and dying men. And like the situation just gets worse and worse and worse, as you can imagine. Kyo, she does it in this way where like the girls are very drawn, like she has a really soft, beautiful line that I love. And so the girls are really vivid and emotional and full of expression, but all of the men are just like white, glowy shadows, like human-shaped shadows. So they're just like, they're this scary presence in the girls' world that they don't understand. And this stylistic choice is so interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really great book. I'd love to see it in English. The anime might bring it in English, so fingers crossed.
Worst case, we can lean on Christopher and Deb.
Yeah, I would totally, you know I am. I'm like, hey, Chris, Deb, hi, do you want to publish Cocoon? Can I do one other shout out that's not a bummer?
Yeah.
No, sorry. It's only one per.
There's only bummer shout outs.
Yeah. No, what have you got for us?
I was just going to say that I've been rewatching What Did You Eat Yesterday, the drama adaptation of Fumi Yoshinaga's manga. And it is a treasure and a delight, and everyone should watch it. It's on Netflix. I don't think it's on Netflix in America, but if you're in Japan, it is subtitled in English, so you can enjoy sweet, sweet love of two middle-aged men who enjoy cooking together.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's just very heartwarming.
Chip, do you have the shout-out?
I'm going to go real low this week, and I'm just going to say my shout-out is Sex and the City, and just like that.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm in. You know what? I got all caught up. You know, I miss the ladies. I miss Samantha. I miss Charlotte, Miranda. I'm sad Samantha's not there, but you know, I'm dealing. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's good. I'm not going to say it's good, but I'm just drawn to it. It's like a warm blanket around me. Sex and the City meant a lot to me in my youth, and I'm glad to see it back.
Nice. And just like that, Andrew, do you have anything for us this week? Other than my terrible segue from Chip's Sex and the City.
I've been catching up on Blue Lock, actually.
Oh, soccer manga?
The soccer manga. I have no interest in soccer whatsoever. And I'm always amazed by sports manga that can get me excited, because I have no enthusiasm for the topic at all. But it's great. I love it. It makes, I don't know. I'm just totally swept up. Yeah, Blue Lock. Check it out. Everyone already knows, but...
The artist on that one, they're really good. I liked some of their prior manga as well. Like really, like good squash and stretch, I guess, to borrow an animation term. Really, like creepy looking fun characters. Nice.
If you're not into sports manga, what brought you to that, Andrew?
I wanted to know what all the buzz was about. I wanted to, it's because I feel like it's huge and everyone's loving it. And so I needed to know why. And it's really well structured. It's got some good, not twists exactly, but it like pleats sort of, like one more layer of complexity every volume, you know?
I like that.
Yeah. It's keeping me going.
Cool. And I will wrap us up for this episode. A long-running manga-splaining trope is me watching things that I should have watched, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago. And on that note, I finally saw Koyanis Katsi, the 1982 non-narrative film. It's sort of just all imagery of like Earth and life and things like that. And it's actually a fantastic counterpart to Okinawa. Just
I
for
can
how-
totally see that.
Yeah, it emphasizes like our relationship to the earth and how we could very easily screw it up and probably have thoroughly screwed it up already. It's very moving despite having no words. And like the way that Higa talks about Okinawa feels sort of like the way that Godfrey Reggio, the director, depicted the earth, where it's like, no, this is our home. We have to love this place. Because if we don't, like, we're all screwed. And I didn't think this shout out was going to be a bummer when I started talking, but I didn't get there in the end.
I tried to get us away from the bummer shout out.
Yeah. It's just a nice square now.
I'll bring it around. I used to do a lot of my comics writing to that soundtrack, the Philip Glass soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I could totally see
So-
it. It's an amazing movie.
So to bring it back up, I was writing Howard the Duck to that.
Nice. You brought it way up. Good job.
Thank you.
See?
Thank you.
Perfect. So, Chip, I think we did it. I think we should thank Jocelyne, we should thank Andrew, and then we should go to bed.
So I suppose we
What do you
should.
think?
It makes it sound like we're going to bed. We're going to bed together. I think it's time for us to go to bed.
It's like a Bert and Ernie thing.
Yeah.
But Jocelyne, Andrew, thank you for a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Hopefully you had fun too.
Awesome. We'll see you next
Definitely.
week.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. You know, a lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
With everything you have on your plate, earning your degree online seems impossible. But at Grand Canyon University, we specialize in helping you fit a master's degree in education into your busy day. Your graduation team, led by your own GCU counselor, provides you with the personal support you need to succeed. Achieve your goals with a plan and team behind you. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Visit gcu.edu.